Imagine living your life after 50 and feeling energized and excited about your future. Welcome to the Women in the Middle podcast, the podcast for women who are ready to figure out what they want and create the life they deserve. Here's your host and master certified life coach, Susie Rosenstein.
Hey there, today's episode is all about the reality of when your aging parents live in a rural community. Let's go. Welcome back to the podcast Women in the Middle. I'm your host, Susie Rosenstein, your master certified coach and midlife mentor, and I am so glad to be here with you again for this week's episode. Today we're talking about the reality, what is really going on when your aging parents not only don't live close to you, but also live in the middle of nowhere in a rural community. My guest today does an amazing job of explaining the details, and I must say, you just might be a little surprised about what's going on in this type of a situation. It will help you think through some of the challenges that may also be going on in your life if you're also caring for aging parents. Lots of good stuff and a funny story or two coming your way. But just quick, before we dive in, I have a question for you. Did you know that midlife transformation coaching is the fastest way to rediscover joy and purpose after 50? Here's the thing. You can fear the future or shape it. Which will you choose? Is this you? You started to notice that you're really afraid that time is slipping away while you wait for clarity on what truly matters to you? Maybe you feel the pull to do something meaningful but aren't sure what that is, or worse, you might worry that even if you do figure it out, you're never going to follow through. Here's the truth. You can stay where you are, stuck in the same cycle year after year, feeling uncertain and afraid of what's ahead, or you can take control and make the second half of your life the most fulfilling, exciting, and intentional years yet. If you're ready to stop waiting and start living, then the Women in the Middle Academy is exactly where you need to be. It's perfect for you when you're ready to find clarity, confidence, and joy in midlife without wasting any more time feeling stuck. So, what do you think? What if your next chapter could be the most exciting, fulfilling, and purposeful one yet? Purposeful. You don't have to settle for feeling stuck, overwhelmed, or running out of time. The Women in the Middle Academy is your path to getting unstuck, gaining clarity, and stepping into the life that you've always wanted. How about that? It's totally time to stop waiting for the right moment and start creating the excitement, joy, and fulfillment that you're craving. I know how that feels. That was me for 5 years. I would love to be able to help you get unstuck, happier, and more fulfilled than you've been in ages. So go ahead and book your free, no obligation momentum call at www.talktosusie.com, and we'll talk about what this could mean for you. Okay, now let me tell you about my amazing guest, Renee Schulte. She was originally my guest in my second podcast, The Women in the Middle Entrepreneurs. But I wanted to share this episode with you here as well because I know you're going to love it, and it fits in so well with the theme of this podcast, Women in the Middle Loving Life After 50. It's really about figuring all that stuff out. You'll hear about caring for aging parents in a rural situation while you're working and also trying to take care of your own health. Renee has over 20 years of leadership experience in the mental health field at the national, state, and provider levels. Because of her work in both the public and private sectors, she has a distinct understanding of the complexities in delivering quality healthcare to all, especially rural and remote communities. Renee is nationally recognized for her expertise in behavioral health policy, system design, policy and financial analysis, and strategic consulting. As a licensed mental health therapist, Renee has spent time working at many levels of care, including psychiatric hospital, child welfare, and therapeutic foster care. As a legislator, she spearheaded the passage of mental health redesign in Iowa. Merging these two perspectives, she began Schulte Consulting, LLC in 2012 and Rural Policy Partners in 2022. Today, Renee will be sharing a personal part of her life, having aging parents and being a full-time healthcare consultant. Renee is definitely a woman in the middle entrepreneur who's leading difficult conversations to destigmatize behavioral and mental health. And quite frankly, I can't imagine a more perfect person to talk about the reality of caring for aging parents who live in a rural setting, and in Renee's situation, a frontier setting. Now, without further ado, please enjoy this episode. Welcome to Women in the Middle Entrepreneurs, the podcast that gives you an unfiltered, behind-the-scenes look at what it's really like being a woman in the middle who's over 50 and following her entrepreneurial dreams. Grab a superhero cape, girlfriend, because you deserve one. I'm your host, Master Certified Life Coach and Midlife Mentor, Susie Rosenstein, and I am excited to inspire you with interviews that feature all of this midlife amazingness. Let's go. Hey there, welcome back to the show. We have a really exciting interview again, all lined up about having aging parents and being a full-time healthcare consultant. Today, you'll be meeting Renee Schulte, a woman in the middle entrepreneur who's leading difficult conversations to destigmatize behavioral health. Welcome to the show, Renee. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Susie. I'm so excited for this conversation.
Me too. I know we're going to have a really good one too about your midlife entrepreneur story. And we're going to be talking about business and what's going really well, and also what midlife issues might be getting in your way. Sometimes I call them a hiccup, a challenge, a collision course, an intersection, any of those things, whatever's going on with you and why it's challenging for you in your life as well as being a business owner. So let's start out with a really juicy question for you. How old you are, how long you've been an entrepreneur, what your entrepreneurial, journey has been, and what you do in the world. So take it away.
Yeah, so I'm 52 years old. I live in Urbandale, Iowa, which is outside Des Moines, Iowa in America. And I have been working as a healthcare consultant now for over 12 years. I was a mental health therapist for a very long time, and that sort of set everything up, and then was recruited to run for political office. And so I have a stint in the public eye as a state legislator in Iowa. And while ran for office, we redesigned our mental health system. That was the reason I ran. That's what I chose to do. And then after I was done being elected, moved in as a consultant for the state and got to write all the rules for the laws that we passed. And there's not very many people with that opportunity. So I've had a really interesting background, really understand policy and law and all those juicy details. And so that has led for a very interesting career. You get asked to do things that are considered hard, difficult, or impossible in the healthcare system. A lot of things like implementation challenges. People just don't work together. Maybe you could help us mediate our problems with our staff. Or, hey, we just did this big illegal thing and we're going to lose our license if we don't fix our policies and procedures. So we do a lot of work like that. And we focus on rural, remote, and frontier communities. And so I've done a ton of work in the middle of the United States in most of that Midwestern kind of open air country that we live in.
Wow. You use the word frontier.
Yeah.
What is that?
Well, in America, we have some places where there's less people than cows, right? There's a lot of that going on. And so frontier is actually a community that has, I forget what the number of people per square mile, but not very many. And so we will actually go to those places, to those remote hospitals and those remote communities and try to help them, because a lot of times the little critical access hospital may be the only thing in the community and people need mental health help. And they just don't know what to do because critical access hospitals are set up for regular healthcare in America, not for mental health. And so they don't know what to do or how to get people services, those kinds of things. So we're willing to go anywhere. So we claim frontier because not a lot of consultants want to go to those small towns, but that's our favorite places to be.
Wow, I didn't even know that was a thing. I just thought rural.
Yeah,
but this
well,
is
it gets even more. It gets even more rural. You get remote and think about going to the middle of nowhere. And America, a lot of people think of the coasts. And so a lot of consultants are on the coasts. And one of the big things we have found is we call them coastal consultants out of love, but they come to the heartland and try to tell us what to do. And nothing we do or live matches what's going on the coast. I mean, our biggest city in Des Moines is a small town in some places. And so, it's not what people think the Midwest is. And so when you get a coastal consultant coming, telling us what's going to work in New Orleans, New York, Seattle, that's all great, but we don't have, for one, transportation to get anywhere. That's not what's available in the middle of the United States. And so, there's just 1,000 things like that. So we've decided to raise up some really smart people, created a company that's called Rural Policy Partners, and have some young up and coming people from the Midwest who specialize in rural that can help us work and be really good at what we do. And it's been a lot of fun.
This is fascinating. Renee, I didn't know. I didn't really appreciate this until you said frontier. And I don't think I've ever heard the word frontier in an interview. Really?
Well, that makes us different. We're just going to claim it because it's a lot of fun. I mean, we travel to really the middle of nowhere and find places to stay. And well, here's an example. We've decided our travel now, when we go to rural hospitals, we travel at the end of the week because most of the rural communities, their places for dinner are closed on Mondays and Tuesdays. Never thought about that. But rural communities, they close. And so it's like, if we want to eat at decent places, we had to flip our schedule. So we travel at the end of the week to make sure we get to eat. I mean, it's little things like that.
Yeah.
Makes a big difference.
Wow, that's fascinating. I remember I have one friend who owns a farm and she's a few hours away. And when she bought the farm, she, we wanted to visit, and we were new with the GPS at the time. It was a very new system. And we were in shock that when you put on the dirt road setting, that we actually got to her mailbox post, that the system actually worked. Because really, you think about it, it's very hard to go 10 miles past the red barn and take a right at the oak tree at night. I mean, there's no way we could have found it.
Yes.
Wow. So you really are helping people in the middle of nowhere. And as you mentioned, mental health is already underserved.
Right. And then the rural communities, it's even more so. So you've got to be really creative with your strategies about, who can help? What does that look like? And we have lots and lots of support groups across the country, or like in the little church basement, or they might be the hairdresser might be the place to go because that's where they know what to do. And they have all that small town gossip and can get people connected. And so we really have to be a lot more challenged in how you think about it, because it's just not the same. That you just don't have what you have available in a city out in some of those rural areas. And I'm sure that's the same where you are too. Some of your rural communities are going to be a long way from any kind of services. And a lot of folks don't think about it.
Yeah. Yeah. And even in a city, it's confusing to know how to get support. Very challenging. Okay. So as if your job wasn't challenging enough, I know that you're also challenged with having aging parents. So tell me how that is showing up for you as you're trying to run your business.
Yeah. So this has been a newer challenge in my life the past couple of years. My parents are 6 hours away from where I live. We have 4 children and 4 siblings, and none of us live near my parents. And that's a new thing I'm Generation X, and our generation is one of those big generations that moved away from home. And so as my parents started to age, they just expected that all the help would come from their children, but none of their children lived there. That became problem number 1. And then number 2 is I'm the oldest, so I got power of attorney. I guess luck of the draw, not really sure. And that puts me in a spot of assisting and helping with decisions and things of that nature. But I'm not anywhere close. And I have a job that's growing and thriving where I am. And yes, I can do work that's remote and I can move, but I still have to be professional and still have to be, able to work. And my family doesn't get that, right? I have siblings that have maybe the more 9-to-5 type job with an office. So they think, well, you work for yourself, so you should be flexible to take mom to her appointment or whatever. And just for people's reference, for me to take my mom to her neurology appointment, it's 6 hours to my parents' house, another 3 hours to her neurologist. And so the expectation was that I would pick them up and take them to the neurologist. That is an 18-hour round trip. And you're just supposed to somehow slide that in during the work week, because that's when neurologists are available. And you're just supposed to give up whatever you're doing for work to make sure so-and-so makes it to an appointment. And they have to be seen annually in order for them to get their medications. And my father shouldn't be driving my mother to those appointments. And so, you're looking for options. And that's just one, probably 1,000 examples. But inconvenient is to say at the least. But there's a lot of just super big challenges. And people just expect, because you work for yourself as an entrepreneur, hey, you could just take that time. You're flexible. You can work around it. And it's not always the case.
Yeah. Yeah. That is quite an example. When you really think about it, it is an 18-hour thing, which means how many days would you realistically need to take off to make that appointment?
For just one appointment, you're about 3 days, because you would want to be there the night before, pick them up and take them early in the morning and then bring them back and deal with whatever after effects there are, because there's often medication changes or whatever. And then you're staying a second night for sure, and then potentially driving a third day back. And so, you're trying to partner that up. So what that looks like in reality is like trying to putting things together in bundles. So for an example, here in August, I'll be speaking at an event that's 45 minutes away from my parents' house. So I had to bundle a neurology appointment that week. So I have 2 days at a conference where I'm a keynote speaker, and then turn it into the following day being the transportation Uber driver for my parents to get to an appointment, because they have to get there once a year. And so I try to like do things like that, but it's certainly far from convenient. And hopefully there's nothing else I needed to do that day. But at this point, that's going to be what it is. Those are the kind of things we're talking about.
Wow, that's interesting. And this is a planned thing, let alone a crisis.
Oh, right. Yeah. So from that perspective, I live with parents that don't want to think about aging. They've made their final resting place plans, but between here and there is a complete mystery. And so some of that has been helpful, but some of it's not. And they really don't understand my need to plan things out, because they just think I can just drop everything, or that some other sibling's going to just drop everything. And nobody lives in that world where we could just pick up and drop off. So we're in the process of trying to do exactly that, try to figure out, well, what would a crisis plan be? My parents fancy themselves as aging at home, which is what they want to do, but the home isn't conducive for that. And so it's going to take one fall, one break of some kind, and it's over. And so I absolutely am expecting that crisis will be probably the piece that makes it move forward, not because that's what I want or because of the conversations we've attempted to have, but because that's what my parents are insisting upon at this point. And to be fair, it isn't fair. It's far from fair, because how does that work for somebody like myself or others that need to plan in advance? It just doesn't. It's not a realistic expectation.
It's interesting too, because I'm sure you're in the healthcare space. And while people have the mind to make decisions for themselves,
right?
You want to honor that. And there's all these other implications. Like if they were completely self-reliant, that's one thing. Yeah.
Right.
How are you wrestling with that? You said that they don't even want to talk about it. So what's that like?
So far this past year, we've made 3 or 4 trips over, and I would love to say my parents are super clean and have a great home, but there's some other issues involved in that with some hoarding and some different things. So I've spent a ton of time cleaning and just trying to serve in a way to build trust that they might be able to talk about this stuff more. And so we're about a year in, but the more we do that, the more they want to talk some. So we're still hoping for being able to plan more. We want to try to help them get a trust to put their financial house in order. None of that's the case. And so that, I don't even know where the important documents are at this point. And so trying to just say, hey, that's not feasible, right? And try to see what can we do? How much could we prep in advance? And then I'm trying to learn a lot, having never been a caregiver, right? What to do if there is a crisis. And so there's kind of a 2-pronged approach, I guess, toward what we're going to do next.
And then what about your own mental health and dealing with, how to accept and decide what you're going to work on? Right.
So I learned something. I was at a caregivers conversation not too long ago, and they said that the older parents are looking for independence and comfort. And us as adult children are looking for their health and safety, which makes it very different goal, right? That was a light bulb, because I was like, okay, now I get it. We're not on the same page. So they want to be independent and comfortable, even though that's not really true. I mean, my mother has a Lewy body dementia diagnosis and Parkinsonism. So that's ramping up very quickly to be a big, big problem. And so my dad was cared for by my mother for over 40 years. And now he, in his head, wants to give back and take care of her because she's taken care of him for so long. But he's not exactly a caregiver, right? But he fancies himself to be. So that's a whole different set of challenges, because he wants to be seen as capable and a caregiver. And he didn't cook for 30 years. And all of a sudden now he's trying to take care of my mom or whatever. And he doesn't see that as being completely crazy as far as the kids, because we've never seen him helpful. And so now all of a sudden he thinks he's helpful. And we're all like, what is that? So how I handle that mentally, I laugh a lot. And I kind of have what would be called gallows humor at this point, because I'm going to write a book about this. And it's going to come from the viewpoint of this cat. There's a long story here, but there's a cat involved. And we're going to call him Harvey. And he's being held hostage in the basement at my parents' house. And so he's going to write the book from his vantage point of what it was like to deal with it. And so when I think of those things, it makes me smile and it makes me laugh. And I also record it's probably not appropriate, but I have kind of a list that is like, what in the world is my dad thinking? And when I get text messages or things that are completely off the wall, I just snapshot them and stick them in a file because I am like, what? And keep it and laugh a lot. And later that's going to become material for the book. That is how I mentally handle it.
Oh my God. I love that.
It's crazy.
That.
And I tell stories and people are like, that can't possibly be true. And I'm like, you had to be there to live it, but it is totally true. So I'd be happy to share about the hostage cat if you want to know more, because it is quite a story.
I actually do.
You actually do?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah. Okay. So a year ago, April, it was 1 year ago, I go to my parents' house and I'm supposed to do my first trip to the neurologist, where I drive the 6 hours, supposed to spend the night, go to the neurologist. I wake up really early the next morning to find out that, open a bunch of text messages on my phone where my dad took his favorite cat to the vet in the middle of the night, woke up my mother 45 minutes away because they're rural to get this cat looked after because he'd been bitten by a dog or something. And my mother, he kept her up till like 4 a.m. before a neurology appointment. So I get up about 6:30, come out in the living room, and my dad is sitting there with his hair sticking straight up and there's blood on his shirt and there's blood on his pants. And he's telling me that, and I said, did you take mom to the vet in the middle of the night? And he said, sometimes that's what has to happen around here. And I turned around, shut the door and went, oh my gosh. Because my dad's not on sleep because he's got his own mental health stuff going on. So I go out to find out that my mother had about 2 hours sleep. I had to take them to the neurologist 3 hours away. My dad tells me he only has one pair of pants. So I'm like, I'm going to put a pin in that. What grown-up only has one pair of pants? But they have blood on them. He wears the bloody pants. I get out to the car. There's blood all over the steering wheel cover, on the door. There's cat crap and whatever in the back and some blood. So I clean up all the car because I'm supposed to drive this car to Chicago. And I'm thinking, well, my dad goes with his hair sticking straight up and blood on him to a neurology appointment. And I get there and we're wearing face masks, but the look on the people's faces, right? They're looking at me and I'm like, and he looked like he escaped from somewhere, right? I mean, it was just, and he's not even the patient. So he explains to the neurologist that there's a cat emergency, whatever. So I had to turn around. We had to stop at Olive Garden on the way back. So we got 2 views of this beautiful outfit. And I learned that my dad got bit by the cat. It was an outdoor cat. So I had to stop at a second hospital on the way back home to get him shots because he got bit by a cat. So we got home that night. We had 2 new meds for mom, 2 new meds for dad, and 2 new meds for the cat. And they couldn't tell them apart. And that's my cat story. That cat now has been moved into the inside of the house and he's held hostage in the basement. And so he's going to write the book about all of this because you cannot make this stuff up. You just can't. And I don't even know what to say, right? We're going to change all the names of the family to hide the innocent. My nieces will help because they're going to help. They have pseudonyms for names. It's a family book now. It's going to be great.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know what to say. I mean, you're right.
That's episode 1. There's like a bunch more. The cat's still there and he won't let the cat go. And there's just so many things.
But you know,
you have to laugh. What do you do?
You do have to laugh. There's so many parts to that story. And I'll just mention the last part, just of having confusing meds.
Oh yeah.
I mean, just that one piece of the story, having one pair of pants, having blood everywhere and having people look at you and have questions and you being concerned about blood, about what happened, about the neurology appointment, about
she flunked the neurology appointment. And the doctor said, well, you need sleep. I'm like, yeah, all those things. Right. And so, and he's the caregiver. So you see where we are. And, and I really, I forget what I was doing in my business life. Oh, I was finishing up this massive contract for another state. I had been hired by a state legislature to finish up a state hospital for a state psychiatric hospital. I was finishing up a state psychiatric hospital contract while this was occurring.
You got some new material for a clause.
Right. I mean, you just can't make it up. And so I'm trying, how do you compartmentalize that, right? You're working to try to like help better a system while you have people that it's not mentally right about what all's going on. And yes, I'm concerned about health and safety because I should be. But, how do you then come back from that and be like, oh, and we're just going to live on our own, independent, and things are great. And so it's just not great. And so it's hard because, if you just say some of the things that I have seen and heard, anybody out there is like, oh, you've got to take over conservatorship and help. But that would be just such a disaster. My dad at this point really believes he's capable and wants to do it. And so he has that agency, right? And so we can't just pull back. And so for me, it's that balance of, okay, I can't fix this for you. If this is what you insist upon, then I have to shift to, okay, so wait till there's a crisis and then what? And I don't want to be 100% caught off guard because I may not have that flexibility in work or life to just pick up and be like, oh, 100% here, you're the caretaker. I don't get to plan that, but I haven't seen my schedule be like that, right? It just has an opening for, several weeks of crisis. I don't think
oh my God.
It's a thing, right?
Well, the thing that I love that you mentioned in passing is that you did reach out to a caregivers group or association or something, right? Yeah. That just made my heart sing for you because you do need support. Absolutely. You need support. And what you get from organizations like that is they've seen it all and they really have your interests at heart.
Right. And there's some really awesome people that work in this space. It really is new to me. So I had to start thinking about it from that perspective of this is not something I know. And why would I know how to care for aging parents? I've never done it before. So really taking that time to learn. So I've had to shift what I would normally want to read about or know about because I need to know about this. So that is a shift in what I would prefer to do potentially. It's not my top 10 list of ideas of reading. And in social media, I've actually used it for that too. There's some really great support groups for people that are caregivers and that give you information. And then I talk to people that appreciate my ridiculous sense of humor and make people laugh. I can tell stories about all of this for days. And so if nothing else, I can enjoy that and turn it into something. Yes, it's tragic, but at the same time, it's stinking funny. When I got back around to that subject about the pants, because I did put a pin in it. And the next day we're like, okay, let's chat about that. And it's like, well, that was his favorite pair. And I'm like, well, great. What are they? And so there's an image in my mind. He's taken them off and thrown them to me while he sits in his chair with a towel across his lap with his boxers so that I can look at the brand so that I could order more. And which I did. I ordered them more and he's very grateful. He has new pairs, but there's some of that not connecting that you can do that too, right? There's a disconnect because he's so overwhelmed with caring for my mom that he's just not thinking about some of those things that for us would be pretty simple. Like, hey, let's order more. And it turns into, well, I just don't have more. And at the end of the day, we really did. Right. And we got really lucky. The cat didn't have rabies. And so it ended up being just more of a tetanus situation. So that turned out okay. But you didn't know in the moment. So when and luckily, I think I figured out later that most of the blood in the car was his from being bitten by the cat, more so than the cat itself. But who knows, right? And so I'm supposed to drive a vehicle covered in blood, and oh my gosh, how do you make that stuff up, right? You walk outside and there's a car covered in blood, and you're supposed to drive it somewhere to a professional's office, no less.
Well, and also you mentioned there was cat poo, and your dad's hair was standing straight up, like the visual of walking.
Oh, it's amazing
with the bloody outfits and the hair and the mask and the looks on other people, and you just being like you just made a Herculean effort to get everybody where they needed to go. And there was so much going on. Wow.
Right. And my dad gets really cranky, like if he hasn't eaten and stuff. And so I made a decision when I got into the burbs of Chicago to stop and pick him up something to eat. And he was mad about that because we were going to be late and all of this stuff. But as soon as I got him food and he started eating, his attitude improves. He's one of those hangry people. So I don't, there's just things like that. I just know. And so I just do it, knowing that my life will be better if I do it. But we have also figured out that I don't stay in the house anymore. We stay in hotels and come over much later in the morning to make sure they get plenty of sleep. Because just one time I was there within the last year and I just got up to work with my laptop at my desk but they heard me in the house. And so then mom wanted up and dad has to help her get up and then they come see me, but they're both up 2 or 3 hours earlier than they normally would be and both really cranky. And I was like, oh no, just go back to bed. This is not going to work. So now we don't do that.
Great
so
observation.
Pieces, but we've had to learn it, unfortunately, the hard way and so I've told my siblings, I'm like, hey, if you go, which is cool that you do, and here's some things you can do to be helpful, but all get a hotel just because you don't want that kind of fight. And they all have kids. The kids are going to want to be up earlier, and it's just better. And so we're just trying to work through some of those things that you just land in, right? You don't know it's not going to work till you get there. And
that's a great example. That's a really great example. Now, the other thing you mentioned is one of your other challenges is taking care of your own health.
Oh, so, absolutely.
Yeah. How's that going? What came up for you?
Well, one of the caregiver groups I was just in said, a lady was joking. She goes, she's caring for her aging parents and her blood pressure is higher than theirs. I'm like, I am right there. I've never had blood pressure issues before, but I do now. And my parents are well cared for with their blood pressure. So they're probably doing just fine. But it is the extra stress, right? On the adult caregiver or the adult child who is like, this hasn't been something they've dealt with before. So additional stress, additional blood pressure, just figuring out like some of that's changing as I've turned 50. It was really rough at the beginning of my 40s, but then I sort of settled in and had 10 years that I kind of understood what my health was doing. Then I hit 50. Now I don't understand again. And so it's like I'm trying to learn new things. So trying to take care of my own health on top of it, besides just mental health, right? So we've talked about how I have people I can call that are supports that just listen, that I can share stories, that laugh and mess around. But, I'm always constantly looking for better healthcare options too, and making sure that I'm staying up with the best and the greatest. And that there's a piece too. I don't know if this is for everybody or just my parents, but I end up learning things about their health history that impact me genetically that I've never known. And so part of this journey has been getting into their records. And oh man, don't get me started on how hard it is to get like 2 doctors' sets of medicines the same for my mother, because one will change here and not tell the other, and they change there and not tell the other, and what a mess. But figuring out, I'm like, okay, what is that? And learning, oh, my dad has whatever that I have too, but nobody's ever mentioned it. And so there's a lot of that. So there's some
interesting
good parts that come out of having to dive into this, is like, I've learned some things, but I'm always like, how the heck did I make it to 52 and not know that? And there's a lot. I'm like, wait, how long have you had that diagnosis? And were you going to tell anybody? Because it's like, you have 4 kids and some of that's genetic. Are we going to have to deal with some of those things too? And
yeah,
so wow, it's been fascinating.
Yeah, it's a lot. Now, I asked in the application what you really want next in your business, and you said you'd really love to be able to move away and work remote. So what does that look like for you? I know you hate winter, so do I.
So my father-in-law's family, my father-in-law just passed in December, and he lived near here in Des Moines. So we were close to my in-laws. So that's how I got to here. And so I don't have to be here as far as tethered anymore. So what I'd like to do is figure out, but I have no desire to go move closer to my parents to do all of that full time. That's not it. But I mean, somewhere warmer, because my body feels better. The older I get, warmer, drier air works better for just me and just how I'm created. And so figuring out what could that look like, and whether that's split time or whether that's more full time, just having the flexibility, which completely is opposite of having aging parents tethered in one location. And so it's very fascinating. I also have potential international work. I had an international trip that could potentially turn into some international work. But how in the world can my brain think about expanding into that space while needing to care for aging parents? And so that when you talked about the subject matter of being, entrepreneurs in the middle, I'm like, I'm 100% stuck there, because it's like, I want a dream and my business is building and growing because I've had it for a while and we're doing great stuff, but yet you're sort of stuck getting pulled back into responsibilities. And it's not that you don't want to do the responsibilities, but how in the world can you figure out how to do both? Especially if your parents aren't really big on asking for outside help, which is the current situation. That makes it really tough.
Yeah, I can totally see that. You're in the middle. That's for sure.
In the middle.
And I asked also about what surprises you about being over 50 now and an entrepreneur. And you mentioned that you have wisdom. And I love that you said that, because I'm always like, oh, we're not just older, we're older and wiser. So you're feeling wise these days?
I don't know so much about that, but I've been around a minute now where I've done a lot of problem solving. And so I can see the end of the tunnel a little clearer than some of our younger colleagues, I guess I should say. And so with building the partnership, what we were working on is bringing on partners that are newer to consulting to kind of help show them the ropes of like all the things. And they don't know how to write a contract or how to bill or how to do those kind of things. And some of that to me now is second nature. So it's not that I feel like I'm super smart, but it is that I have more life experience. And so
Yes.
for some of that stuff in the workspace, I can help a younger consultant and say, okay, here's how I would structure it, and making sure you don't deal with scope creep and all the stuff that happens where you make no dollars at the end of the day, and making sure you get paid well. And so I have a lot that I can give. And that actually was a surprise. I hadn't thought about it. I had just accumulated that knowledge over time. And by bringing on younger partners, I have been able to kind of extend that to others. And so, yeah. And then I just don't freak out about stuff. I'm pretty even keeled, and I used to freak out a lot more, because given things like the cat episode, right? When that's going on in your life, man, everything else is pretty small. So you're just like, in the big scheme of things, right? Everybody's back home taking the right medication, so we're good. And so you just have to it just changes your perspective, I think, about things that used to matter, not so much. And then other things are much more important. And so I think being able to pass that on to others, I think it's really important.
Yeah, that's great. And the other thing that tends to happen, I've seen research about this too, is that one of the things that's super rewarding for older women is being a mentor. And so certainly you're in a bit of that capacity with the way that you're bringing on young people and appreciating what you have to give. That's often what's the word I'm looking for? Awesome. Sorry about that. Little blip. So you are super interesting. Tell us the best way to get a hold of you for your rural policy partner work.
Yeah. So we are on social for Rural Policy Partners on Facebook and LinkedIn, but I also have a website that's just ruralpolicypartners.com. And through that, you can connect with us directly. We like to speak on stages across the country and be able to talk to people about the policy work that we do. That mental health implementation piece is so important, because you can make all the laws in the world, but if you don't actually help people have access or actually have people on the ground doing the work, a policy is nothing. And so I used to work in policy, and that was really important to get that stuff straight. But, a law's not going to do anything if it doesn't actually get to the people, and the people don't actually get to have the services, which is the whole point. And so we're really working now on that implementation side. So yeah, if people would like to reach out, we'd love to connect on ruralpolicypartners.com, and just send us a note and tell us you heard us here. And we'd love to reach out and connect. It'd be great.
Oh my gosh. Renee, you're awesome. Seriously, I know I forgot the word a few minutes ago, but now it's back. I really want to thank you so much for taking the time to share all of these details of what it's really like, what it is really like when you're an entrepreneur. You're serious about your business. You're serious about helping in the way that you're called to help. And clearly you have a calling in this area. It's almost like your entrepreneurial journey was meant to be, even though we didn't know that at the beginning. None of us do. But yeah, like I really appreciate how you're doing the work, and then you're also learning how to be a caregiver, and emphasizing that, I think, was so real that why would we know how to do this? But you've got real issues and real goals and dreams, and real trouble at home, real challenges. So thank you so much for being so authentic and sharing all of that.
You're welcome. I really appreciate the opportunity. This is part of my therapy, actually.
Amazing. Well, like I said, I really love what you're doing, and thanks for doing the work, and thanks for coming on the show. All right, that's it for now. If you are listening and loving what you hear, please like and subscribe. Reviews are great too and much appreciated. And if you're a woman in the middle who's 50 or over, or an entrepreneur and would like to also come on the show, please go to www.midlifeinterviews.com and fill out an application. We'd love to have you on to share your story. Thanks so much for listening. It's never too late for you to put yourself on your agenda. I'm Susie Rosenstein, and I'll talk to you again soon. Now, real quick before we say goodbye, if you are connecting with this show, I'd love to invite you to a happiness breakthrough coaching session. It's my laser-focused coaching call that will help you get clear about what's getting in your way as a woman in the middle entrepreneur, and confident about your next steps to more happiness in your next chapter. Head over to www.nextchapterbreakthrough.com. Talk to you soon. That's it for today's episode. I hope you got a lot out of it, especially if you're supporting your aging parents who live in the middle of nowhere. And now, no matter your situation, I hope you also received the important message about why you have to focus on self-care at all times in midlife, but for sure when it's easy to ignore because times are tough. Now, on a different note, there's one more thing I wanted to share before saying goodbye. Over the last year, I've been networking and collaborating with way more fellow female podcasters than ever before, and it's been such a joy. I just really appreciate the talent, enthusiasm, commitment, and grit that it takes, the energy to create podcasts and do this kind of work consistently. As you know, I always say podcasts are a party in your purse. I wanted to take this opportunity to share a podcast that I've become aware of recently that you might also enjoy. The host's name is Wendy Battles, and she is amazing. When we met, we clicked immediately and quickly discovered how much we had in common. Her show is called Reinvention Rebels. Reinvention Rebels podcast features bold and unapologetic women 50 plus who have transformed their lives in extraordinary ways. Think running marathons at 72, starting a modeling career in your 60s, or launching a national beauty brand in midlife. What do they have in common? They did it scared, took the first step, and unlocked new possibilities. The host, Wendy Battles, is a reinvention rebel herself. She shares inspiring stories which will ignite your courage, build your self-permission muscle, and remind you to bet on yourself as you age. It is never too late to shine brighter and live a life you love. I think you will really enjoy this podcast, so head over to www.reinventionrebels.com or on all your favorite podcast platforms, and you can check it out there. All right, now remember, being the queen of your brain domain is the best way to be. If you want to get unstuck, clear about what you want with the confidence and courage to go after it, then don't waste another minute. Go ahead and book your free insight and momentum call with me and apply for the Women in the Middle Academy. Let's see if coaching together makes sense for you. Head over to www.womeninthemiddleacademy.com. The Women in the Middle podcasts are all about how to love your life again after 50 with more clarity and intention than ever before. And the focus is on coaching you to incorporate mindfulness as a regular practice. This is how you put yourself on your agenda, and it's about time. Finally, for show notes and links, head over to www.susierosenstein.com and click the podcast tab and look for episode 401, where you will find all of the contact links for today's episode. You'll also see links there for my new show, Women in the Middle Entrepreneurs. Thanks so much for listening. It's really time for you to put yourself first, one thought at a time. I'm Susie Rosenstein, and I'll talk to you next week.